All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode. That's right, of hopefully your favorite Chelsea podcast, the London is Blue podcast. Dan, one of your hosts here. And I just want to know, we have a absolutely packed show for you today. Chelsea have finally come around and made the official announcement to the most poorly kept secret of their recruitment efforts since taking over the club. Cristopher Nkunku has officially been announced as a member of Chelsea, signing a 6-year contract. The 25-year-old French forward who previously played for Paris Saint-Germain in Ligue 1 and then more recently for RB Leipzig in the Bundesliga comes to Stamford Bridge on the end of a campaign where he shared the league's golden boot with Werner Bremen's Niklas Füllkrug and scored the opening goal and registered an assist for the second to lift the DFB Pokal trophy as Leipzig beat Eintracht Frankfurt 2-0. So he is coming to us in the perfect point of his career. We're going to look at what the club and the player are saying about the move. We're going to discuss how Pochettino, our new manager, might get the most out of him. We're going to look at some of the stats and figures behind his success and meteoric rise and why Chelsea are bringing him in to the club. And we're also going to answer some of your questions as well with the help of our esteemed scout of record for the show, Sam, also known as CFCCentral. And Sam, I think we previously talked about Nkunku before, but we're coming back to this again with open eyes, with a little bit of a refreshed view on it, because last time we were talking about him, it was with the thought that he was going to be playing under one or two different managers ago. So this is an opportunity for us to just reshare a little bit of information, but also take a look at the new fit and also consider some of the outgoing moves that are going to be happening as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. I think first of all, I'm just delighted that I've broken my own personal jinx. Every single person that we've ended up doing, a scout report or sort of a podcast special in advance, we've inevitably botched. But this one, no, we've done it I think in December we finished off an Nkunku special, and here he is, the man himself. So I'm very, very happy on that count. But yes, the circumstances in which we recorded that pod, I think the scenario was completely different. We were looking at Graham Potter as the long-term sort of successor and taking this project to wherever it needed to be. We also had a lot of options up front, a lot of them now sort of on their way out or out already. So I think it will be interesting to see how that compares with where Nkunku would fit, and also the fact that he personally himself is coming back from a pretty long layoff in terms of injury. So a lot of factors to consider. But like you said, I think it's supremely exciting that we're getting one of Europe's top forwards to come at a time when we don't have Champions League football, at a time where, the ship looks a little unsteady. But the fact that he wants to come and, be a key part of that rebuild, I think speaks volumes about him and how good our project looks to the outsider.
Yeah, it is an exciting time, particularly as supporters have been looking forward to this announcement, and it had been widely reported to have been done and dusted. But until the shirt is on the player, until the announcement comes from ChelseaFC.com, until official player quotes are distributed, until Lee Parker gets his opportunity to do the Chelsea TV interview, it doesn't feel official. So we're going to get into all of that. But before that, we just want to say thank you again for being an amazing supporters community for London's Blue Podcast. We can't thank you enough. Just a reminder, the best way that you can support the show this summer as we continue to drop tons of content is through Patreon. It's patreon.com/London Blue Pod. If you're looking maybe for a free way to support the podcast, you can always subscribe to the show on any platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you can leave a 5-star review, we definitely appreciate that as well. It helps other people find the show. And again, we are having a little bit of call to action. We're putting these episodes up on YouTube. We are trying to go hit 25,000 subscribers. We're over 23,000 now. And look, less than 10% of you who are listening right now, if you go sign up and subscribe on YouTube, that gets us over the goal. So we'd love to have that happen before we head on summer tour, because we're going to have a ton of great content. And look, we love to punch above our weight class, the legacy offerings from big media outlets, the ESPN FCs of the world. They can't control the message. We want to make sure that you're getting the best news and information from the London is Blue podcast. So again, thank you for all your support. But with that said, let's talk about what the club and the player had to say and some of the initial snap reactions to the Nkunku news being officially announced. Cristopher had this to say, saying, "I'm incredibly happy to be joining Chelsea. A big effort was made to bring me to the club, and I'm looking forward to meeting my new coach and teammates and showing Chelsea supporters what I can do on the pitch. Having played in Ligue 1 and the Bundesliga, and I want to play in the Premier League, one of the strongest leagues in the world. I'm very excited for this challenge and will be proud to wear the Chelsea shirt." So, Sam, it's the perfect comment. You're not going to expect anything too different when someone is giving the official PR clip. But again, it's just something that is getting people excited and building into what the future could hold and why the players excited for Chelsea as a larger project or opportunity to play in the Premier League.
Yeah, I don't think that sounds like PR to me. At least that is what I'd like to believe. But it's been a significant risk on his behalf as well. If we look at the lens from where he's coming through, he could have had his own pick. He could have gone to PSG, he could have gone to Real, he could have gone to a massive amount of clubs that were circling for him. But the fact that we managed to get this deal done early and that he decided to come here is a testament that he wants to prove himself, wants to play in the Premier League, like he said in his statement. And I think it bodes well for us. He's hungry, he's competitive. Hopefully, he has had some time to recharge now. Will come back absolutely gunning in preseason. So fingers crossed. I think, like you said, it's just now about trying to figure out how Pochettino is going to use him, what the vision is in terms of our new look attack. We don't have a centre forward as yet at the club. So, what is the role, the responsibility that Pochettino wants to delegate to him? That will be very interesting to see from a macro standpoint. But everything else, I think, is supremely exciting. Just having somebody of his caliber at the club is a massive statement for the ownership to make, that we are going to get the marquee names, even if it is a period of relative instability. And I think they've delivered on their promise.
We also saw comments from Lawrence Stewart and Paul Winstanley. Those are Chelsea's co-sporting directors. Their comment read, "Cristopher has proved himself one of the standout attacking players in European football over the past 2 seasons and will add quality, creativity, and versatility to our squad. He has demonstrated his ability at the highest level with RB Leipzig in France, and we look forward to him joining up with his new teammates ahead of the new season." So, Sam, we typically use the 3-word match review in our post-match episodes to summarize our thoughts on a performance, to encapsulate the moment. What would be your 3-word reaction to the signing, your 3-word signing review, if it were?
I think it would be Michelin-starred meal, probably. I think Todd Bowley's definitely gone to one of those restaurants and had an experience of a lifetime. So he's bought us something to eat and feast on, and I'm looking forward to tucking into gourmet attacking signings.
Well, to continue the cringe fest that we are invoking here, I want to do something with balloons. I like the fact that they use helium. So I'm going to put nobly gassed up, because I am very excited for Cristopher Nkunku to be a member of Chelsea's squad. Officially, I'm looking forward to. And in the episode that Nick and I recorded on Sunday, we talked about the players we were most excited to see in preseason. And I said, without knowing that this was going to happen this week, that Cristopher Nkunku and Santos would be the 2 players I'd be most excited to see this summer. In addition to seeing you when we stop in Raleigh-Durham for the Wrexham match, the 3 people I'm most excited to see in North Carolina.
Oh, absolutely. I think you're lucky that you are in a podcast with probably the only person in the world who would have appreciated that pun. But other than that, I would say that, it is definitely going to be, I think, one of those players that everybody is eager to watch. We saw the kind of reception Sterling had the last time he arrived in the States. I think that's the level of signing that we're looking at. Somebody who's coming in with, I think at the age of 25, somebody who's now coming in with established credentials in 2 different leagues. He's at PSG, obviously he didn't clock the kind of numbers, but he was still considered one of the best, at the club, and wasn't really a big loss in terms of letting him go to RB Leipzig. But then, you came to know in the first couple of seasons how good he was. So he's probably going to be, itching to go. And a lot of people, including me, will be hoping that we get to see that initial glimpse, the kind of stuff that we saw from Enzo Fernandez the first time he pinged the long ball, 70 yards across the pitch. So looking forward to an attacker finally letting my heart fly and float into the air.
So while we're talking about things that are on the rise, it is the excitement for Cristopher Nkunku. But there is a sentiment, there is a concern, there is a thought that whomever Chelsea put in an attacking role is going to struggle, that there's a curse of the number 9 shirt. I think Tammy Abraham generally proved that that is a little inaccurate, or maybe he was the exception to the rule during his time here. What would you say, Sam, just to address the concerns that people have? Over the last couple seasons, we've signed several forwards. They have not hit the peak or promise of what their potential is. They haven't necessarily transitioned quickly and been ultimately as successful as they could have been or have been in other leagues. I think people would point to Timo Werner or Kai Havertz as individuals where it was a high price tag and maybe the overall performance. Again, I don't think many people would trade Kai Havertz and the goal for the second Champions League in most scenarios, but there are people, I think, who have a legitimate question that they could ask around why should we be excited, or why is this individual less likely to struggle in that adaptation? And do you have any initial comments that you would say to address that concern?
Yeah, I think the first would probably be that he's not German. But the second, the jokes apart. But I mean, in all seriousness, I think what's sort of convinced me initially, I wasn't really, moved by Nkunku. This is when he was playing with Timo before he came to us. So when I was watching him, then there was obviously a lot of stuff that needed to be improved on. Looked like a raw talent, somebody who needed to get more confidence before he could execute high level actions. But as and when the seasons have rolled on, he's added more and more to his armory. You've seen him go from somebody who's trying to ply his trade out wide to somebody who's being moved into the center. Now he's able to sort of execute high level movements that you want to see from center forwards. I think that's something that really, really interested me. The fact that he was, he is 5'8" or 5'8.5", but ended up scoring 2 goals, 2-headed goals against Manchester City when he scored a hat trick. It just went to show that even in high level competitions against high level opposition, this was a guy who knew how to sort of, make the best out of his own movements. His faith in how well he can find space when there is none is sort of different from what I would say a Timo Werner came with. Werner we knew was somebody who had devastating pace, was incredible if you found one of his off the ball runs or if you tried to release him beyond the last line. But in the Premier League, when almost every team comes in, when playing against Chelsea, then they try to sit in a low compact block as soon as the attack is done, and then it's hard for somebody like a Timo who doesn't really have a great first touch, doesn't really have the kind of superiority that you want to see in tight spaces, execute the kind of attacking things that we wanted from a top level forward. With Havertz, I would say he is still a very good player, but probably we haven't seen him in his ideal setup. We could have seen him probably with Romelu Lukaku as sort of like part of a front two, but obviously that went completely out of plan once things started disintegrating. So I would still say that he comes in as a better rounded player, somebody who's a fantastic finish. I would say leagues ahead of both Kai Havertz and Timo Werner. Somebody who's not as one-footed as Havertz as well. Havertz is somebody who prefers his left foot, and the way he shoots, his shot selection, the way he behaves when he's sort of attacking the last line, it's very predictive. It's something that has sort of haunted us. He's missed a lot of 1v1 chances. We saw the amount of chances he missed last season as well. So I would say that you're finally getting somebody who's able to execute those actions consistently at a high level. somebody who's a better finisher, and somebody who not only has shown that he can attack beyond the last line, but also operate in tight spaces in between. He's very, very good with his footwork. He's technically brilliant. So I would say that he's coming in and probably be as good or even better than a Mason Mount at number 10. So you're looking at that level of a signing, able to create, able to score, an all-round attacker for the ages.
Yeah, we have talked about the fact that if Mason Mount is to leave as a part of the offers that United are making to bring him into a different part of England, into a different squad, that who replaces the goal and assist contribution that he has, and it very much feels like it is a more volume in a drag and drop that Nkunku provides. When you look at things like the goals to shots on target per 90, his amount has been on the rise the past couple seasons from 0.49, so that's 0.5 at 0.52 this last season, and that was with some injury and missing sometimes. He had 9 less 90s than he did in the prior season, so it went from 30.3 to 21.1. Very strong ability to convert with the shots that he received, and actually even with a lower shot on target volume was turning more goals from shots on target. So very interesting to see the way that he's progressed season over season in his time in the Bundesliga playing for RB Leipzig. We have a whole lot more we want to talk about. We are going to take a very quick break. We want to thank these sponsors for supporting the show. When we come back, we're going to talk about particularly the usage of Nkunku under Pochettino. What is our new manager going to be most excited about when it comes to leveraging this player in his plans for next season? So stay tuned, and we'll be right back to talk about that. All right, we're going to talk about Nkunku under Mauricio Pochettino, but with a real quick reminder that we are going to be on tour this summer. We are going to Raleigh, where I believe Sam will be as well. We're going to Philadelphia, we're going to Atlanta, and we're going to DC for all of the Chelsea matches. We've been working with all of the supporters groups in those cities to put on a live show for you. Eventbrite's allowing you to sign up and just let us know that you're going to be there, are going to be coming out in the very near future. So pay attention on our social media channels, and we'll also link them in the podcast notes when we've dropped them so that you can be a part of that. No fee to join us. It's just a matter of helping us and helping those club supporters groups plan for who's going to be there so that they can get the maximum amount of space possible. But we're excited to see everybody this summer, in addition to these players like Nkunku under Mauricio Pochettino. And so, Sam, we had talked about Nkunku under many managers. Let's talk about him under Mauricio Pochettino. We know that there is some movement likely with several attackers in this side. We know that there are individuals like Mykhailo Mudryk and Noni Madueke who maybe weren't in the consideration prior when we talked about Nkunku. How are you feeling about the way that you're expecting Mauricio to maximize Nkunku, particularly with Matt Law also reporting that Chelsea believe they've effectively landed 3 players in one? That was a quote from his article on the signing. Effectively a striker, a winger, and a number 10 because of the versatility he provides, the way he can score goals, how he can play across the fullness of the front line. Where are we going to get the most out of him?
Well, I think Matt was absolutely spot on. I mean, he's somebody who's shown that he can play all those 3 positions to an extremely high level. We were talking about that hat-trick against Manchester City. He scored that as a right winger, so not even on his preferred side in a 4-2-3-1. He's also scored a lot of goals and shown, in my opinion, his best in an central attacking midfield role in that hole behind the centre forward. He's also put in some terrific performances on the left. If you look at the kind of movements that he makes, he likes drifting to the left-hand side. He's got the right kind of angles from there where he can create and shoot. On the right, not so much. It's more about drifting inside and getting in and trying to deliver first time, or maybe make those off-the-ball movements for somebody to cross in at the far post. So he does operate differently in different positions, but I would say Pochettino should and is probably looking at him in the number 10 role. from a squad building perspective, I would say that, if you are moving on Kai Havertz, if you are looking to move on even a Conor Gallagher, for example, in an ideal world, you would probably have Mason Mount and Nkunku in that number 10 role. For me, that would be world class sort of squad depth and rotation perspective, where you're putting two very good young players next to each other who want to push each other and start. And the good thing is, Nkunku can also play on the left, on the right. He can also play as a center forward. Mount, for example, also has shown that he can do some things from the wide role, but he's arguably best as a number 8 or even in that number 10 role from where he can receive in those tight pockets and create. So I would say that the initial sort of 4-2-3-1, the three forwards look like Mikhailo Mudryk, Cristopher Nkunku, and Raheem Sterling on the right hand side. So that's the three. And probably we would see, a number 9 or a centre forward if it's Nicholas Jackson, if it's Armando Broja, if it's David Datro Fofana. We don't quite know. But there could also be an alternative where Nkunku plays as the number 9, and you could have, say, a Mikhailo Mudryk, Raheem Sterling, and Noni Madueke on the right hand side. So even those permutations are possible. It might not work, but it's obviously Poch's creative reign to figure out how he wants to use the player. The good thing is very, very good technically in all those three roles. So he just has to sort of put 2 and 2 together. But in my opinion, you either play him as the central attacking midfielder or you play him as one of 2 forwards. So if there is a formation change that Poch is looking at, put him next to somebody else who works very well as a second forward, and hopefully you'll see the best of him.
Well, that would be very similar just to how he's been playing most recently at Leipzig with Timo Werner and Nkunku up at top at the same time. Having the ability to connect further forward with an individual feels like it would be a drag and drop solution. I don't necessarily know or feel like that previously there's been usually a recognized forward that Pochettino has played with, whether that was Harry Kane or Mbappe as the kind of primary. But I mean, he has used 2 strikers or 2 attackers up front before, so it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility to see Nkunku +1. It just feels less likely, maybe with the squad makeup that we have today, that there is an identified individual that you would play him with up top.
No, definitely. That's interesting is in his last 7 starts for Leipzig, he has started as a forward, like as a number 9. So, I mean, there is certainly a chance that you play him there. And he's got a lot of, technical skills to work that position, arguably better than Havertz did. But you want him to be able to make his movements. I always said this about Kai. It's one thing when you're being marked by 2 centre backs, and it's one thing when you're arriving from deep with no one actually keeping an eye on you and being able to pop up inside the box and score the kind of goals that he did at Leverkusen. We didn't quite give him that on a consistent basis. In the 3 games that Porto did manage, I would say the one against Dortmund, where he got Mudryk to pin the line, and you saw Kai Havertz sort of dropping into that number 10 position. He was phenomenal. He showed the kind of things he can do when he's operating as a second forward, when he's creating, when he's, pulling defenders out of position, creating havoc. It's something Nkunku can do as well. What he has over Havertz, I would say, is also the ability to create, is those little passes that he picks, and in the disguise that he puts on them. I think it's going to be a fantastic asset in terms of creativity that we've been lacking in the overall squad output. So that would be definitely one to keep an eye on. Like you mentioned, I don't see who that second forward would be. I don't know if he operates, as well with, say, Armando Broja or a Nicholas Jackson. Jackson's obviously played as a number 9. He's also played on the wings at times. So it'll be interesting to see what the squad makeup is, what the system is. But I would probably think that the number 10 role is the established sort of, and it's probably been one of the talking points in the contract talks as well, saying, you're going to play in that central position where you can link up with the other 3 guys and, boost your numbers and do the best of things. So I am dropping a spoiler here, but on watching Nicholas Jackson, I can imagine why we're going after him. I can see it. I can see why the plan is there. I can see glimpses of why the club think it could work, especially with somebody like Nkunku. So I think on that front also, I would say there are reasons to be optimistic.
Well, Yeah, we don't want the CFC Central plus Dan jinx of talking too early about a transfer on the podcast. So we will
No,
just
no.
close that box back up after allowing a little bit of air into it for a moment. Sam, I want to walk through some of the stats that you pulled and taking the stats and helping tell the story about what Nkunku is going to offer. Because for those who have not religiously scouted or watched him and have just gone and seen clips or seen maybe goals, that never gives a complete picture of what that individual is going to bring to the side or have on offer, or show maybe how they progress or show how they are rated relative to other similar players in European football. And you have a lot of information here, so I want to break it down into some digestible segments for the listener or the viewer to understand just exactly the type of player in a little bit more detail that we're getting in terms of things like ball control, activity inside the penalty area, the dribbling, the recoveries, the types of shots he takes. I think those are all things that you have some information here that you want to share that really helps give people the full 360-degree view on the player.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to go in copious detail would be beyond the ambit of this episode. But in short, if I were to talk about his strengths and skills, I think he is first and foremost. I think he's got a fantastic technical foundation. When you watch him play, he's so well versed to his surroundings. He knows exactly where the opponents are. He scans and he's able to take touches on either side with either foot. So you often see him dance away whenever there is pressure on him. In those really, really tight pockets, he's able to navigate away, and he's able to create, and he's able to sort of pull players towards him. So from a technical standpoint, you're looking at somebody who I would say is Joao Felix on steroids, who's not just doing those pretty things well, but who's also able to then move on to the second part and make things happen. That's something that we've obviously missed with Felix, who showed glimpses of quality. And when people see Nkunku do those turns and little flicks where he's able to show his agility, use his body to get away from players, it's at those moments when he can pull out passes, when he can create, he can sort of um, make the best out of the situation. If you look at his ball retention, for example, in the attacking third, he's absolutely fantastic. He's usually able to keep the ball around 70 to 75% of the times when he's dribbling, when he's creating high volume actions. So he is somebody who's not just using the ball and getting you, 16 big chances created, but he's also using the ball well. He's not somebody who's just going to give it away, where you have to then worry about out of possession structures, and do we have the midfield in place to sort of cater to a high volume creator like say a Hakim Ziyech or even a Malo Gusto, for example, who crosses a lot. So he uses the ball well. So the graphs that we've actually put on, which obviously our listeners can't look at, is sort of to illustrate his playing style. If we could show you the penalty area deliveries, you could probably. I'm trying to tell you a sort of story where you don't have to visualize it, where most of his deliveries happen from central zones. He's not somebody who relies on a lot of crosses. He's not somebody who will just hoik it into the penalty area and try to make things happen. He's accurate. He's very meticulous from central zones. So you want him in and around the penalty box, and you basically want to provide him in some kind of a foil that is keeping centre backs away from him. So if you give him that, I would say from a tactical standpoint, if you allow him to be in his own way, just able to roam, able to pick little pockets, able to find multiple runners, then you're bringing the best out of him. When you're looking at Mauricio Pochettino's work at Spurs, there were often times when Christian Eriksen would drop into a role and would have four players ahead of him to hit. He would have Harry Kane, he would have Heung-min Son, he would have somebody from the right wing, sometimes Kyle Walker, Trippier, providing width on the right. One of the left backs would bomb up, or one of the central attacking midfielders would have like shift in. And Ali, for example, Dele Ali would be somewhere inside and offer that option. So you want that kind of a setup. So if he can illustrate and give Nkunku a blueprint where he's got somebody like a Mudrik to hit, somebody like Armando Broya inside the box, or somebody Noni Madueke in space on the right hand side, then you're trying to bring the best out of him. He's definitely geared to making other players better, as well as sort of providing his own level of output. But that's essentially what an ideal version of Nkunku would look like in a Chelsea shirt. You can also sort of, if you look at the recoveries that he's had in the final third, a lot of counter pressing recoveries, which again is something that Pochettino likes. You want somebody who works hard in the attacking third. A lot of counter pressing and sort of positional recovery. So this is just basically the system at RB Leipzig that facilitates him winning the ball back because of his position. And a lot of them, if you could see the graph, are in the attacking midfield, central attacking midfield position. So he does press in as a number 10. He can also press as a forward. He tends to get a little lazy when he's pressing as the forward because he doesn't have to do too much. He has to just, cover passing lanes and provide a little bit of support. But a lot of good things happen when he's sort of pressing from deeper, when he's winning the ball back, and obviously when he's got people ahead of him to hit. So you have basically somebody who ticks a lot of boxes in Poch's setup. And like I mentioned, the short map itself is a story. You can see a lot of happy little spots, which come when you've got a two-footed finisher. Somebody who's very comfortable in pressure situations, somebody who's got great shot selection. Uh, he's not somebody who will do what Kai Havertz did. If you look at a highlight reel of Havertz's shots, especially when he's 1v1 or he's got too much time to think, the first shot that he goes for is a chip. He tries to dink it. He tries to wait for the goalkeeper to go down. And it became so frustrating to a point where you could tell this was something that he wasn't used to. He wasn't used to being, shepherded out of the way by centre backs. He wasn't used to being one-on-one with goalkeepers with, a lot of attention on him. Nkunku is used to those things. He's able to absorb a lot more contact than Werner or Havertz did. So I think, and I hope that in these positions he will provide a lot more of a clinical edge. He does miss a lot of opportunities, but he finishes a lot of difficult ones as well. I think he's genuinely somebody like a Heung-min Song, somebody who gets into the right zones and can finish from either foot. So overall, I would say a pretty well-defined, well-rounded attacking profile. And I would say an archetype number 10, like the ideal prototype of a number 10. You don't want to waste his movement by putting him up against two PL centre backs or three at times. And you don't want him, bumping into somebody like a Yerry Mina or being sort of manhandled all game. You want to give him a little space. You want to make sure that you give him the right tools to succeed. And I think that's what we're trying to facilitate. It's just the number 9, the kind of profile that we find if he can offer the kind of things that Nkunku was offered next to Yusuf Poulsen, next to Andre Silva. I think then you're again checking one more box and making life easier for everybody involved.
We've asked this question before when we sign an attacking player or any player in general. We've asked this question where we talk about what would be a good first season for this player at Chelsea. Where would we want to see them go within their development? Sometimes it's been from the promotion from an academy to the first team, and that's maybe a different one, returning from a loan, or potentially like Nkunku coming from a previous league or different league into the Premier League and playing for Chelsea. Sam, if you take all of this into consideration, what would be a good first year for Nkunku and what would be a great first year?
Do you want me to give you a very sobered down, realistic answer, or do you want me to give you
the sober down is the good year, and I think the great year is the buoyant, floating, 99 blue balloons floating in the sky because he scored so many?
No, I think it will be. I mean, we have to take into consideration that it will be his first season in the league. He's not really played with any of those attackers. He doesn't have any pre-lying chemistry with them. Obviously, pre-season will be very, very key. I do think that realistically, he will get maybe perhaps like 7 goals and like 4 or 5 assists. So maybe a goal or an assist contribution every 3-4 games, 3 games maybe, like in his first season. This is a very, very sobered down, very realistic kind of assessment, because I am looking at players like Mikhailo Mudryk, who isn't at the level of, say, a Dominic Szoboszlai. I am looking at somebody like a Madueke, who's not really, before he came to us, hadn't really completed any 90s for PSV. I think he completed 2 or 3 90s in the league over 3 years. So he's somebody who's still developing. Raheem Sterling, again, had a very productive season. I think those are the kind of numbers I'm looking at, kind of numbers that Sterling pulled out. But I would also expect him to have good underlying numbers. I would probably like see him create a lot more than any of our forwards did in the last season. But I do think that there will be moments where we actually come to know that the squad still has some way to go. So realistically, I would say around 7 goals, around 4 or 5 assists. And then again, if I were sort of happy and absolutely intoxicated, I would say that he would break the 10-goal barrier, like the first guy to do it. And he would probably get around double digits in assists as well. So, I mean, that's me saying that if he plays to his potential, if we suddenly do a Jose Mourinho sort of 10th position turnaround the next season under Conte, then yes, I think that's the kind of numbers I'm looking at.
Well, if it was a 7-4 in the range of 12 to 13 potentially goals plus assists, that would be his lowest contribution since 2020-2021, where he had 12 in total. He had 20 last season, and he did miss time, so he had about 1,000 less minutes due to the injury that he had picked up.
But you have to know that, I mean, this is a question that I've asked a friend of the pod, Dimitri, as well. So I asked him, is there a way that you can design sort of like a league difficulty metric? Like, can we take numbers from, say, the Bundesliga and put them into an algorithm that spits out what that output would look like in the Premier League?
Yeah, just a weighting to like what is a goal worth in every league based upon the way the goal is scored. I'm sure there is some level of visibility, something like that. I would hope, and maybe the aspirational hope, is that it is closer to that 20 in terms of the total contributions of goals plus assist, which would be in line with his last season, maybe just a little shy of that. So I think somewhere between the 12 that you're projecting as a sober realization and the higher double digits on both is maybe the place to be.
The fact that he did 20 sort of goals and assists in 25 games, and he was injured for I think about a good 10 games or so. I don't know, but yeah, I think the fact that he's pulled that off and got the golden boot shared is a testament to the fact that he can pull out those numbers. It wouldn't be beyond us to say that he's capable of it. But yeah, even when I'm buoyant, I want to keep, my feet on the ground. So hopefully I'm just being realistic and saying people should temper their expectations, give him the time he needs to sort of acclimatize well, not put incredible amount of pressure in a season that we don't have anything to feel pressured by. Just have a good, clean top 4, top 3 finish, hopefully, and get the squad gelled well and then ready to fight next season. Next season, my expectations will be significantly higher. But this one, I'm being kind.
All right. Well, we have a ton of listener questions for Sam that we collected before this episode. So we're going to get into those in just a moment to round out this episode. Before we do, we have one last ad break. We want to thank these sponsors for supporting the show. When we get back, it is all of your questions going into things like what are some of those expectations, differences between this signing and others, how does Sam stay so positive? We're going to get into all that right after this break. All right, and as you know, we have the absolute best listeners, and we like to thank them for submitting questions. For those who want the fast pass, the opportunity to make sure that your question is seen above others, that's something we reserve for our wonderful Patreon community and Discord individuals. So we have a bunch of their questions in there, and then 1 and 2 from Twitter as well. But we're going to start with Harper's question for you, Sam, which just is is there ever a time due to circumstance that Sam, CFC Central, doesn't radiate 100% positivity. I haven't seen it yet, so I would also be interested in the answer to this question. The softball to start you off before we get into some of the meatier ones.
No, I think I am the perennial optimist. The glass is always full for me. It's just nice to be, somebody who people look sort of at when things are not going well. It's good to have those conversations in private where you can find something to be uplifting about. I think that's what we need after the kind of season we've gone through. Everybody's had, I think this phase where we've been humbled. We've been like after a lot of success. I think we've crashed back down to earth, and it's been an interesting realization for all of us, and we're all coping differently. But hoping that these are just life lessons where you laugh at yourself and you dust yourself up, pick yourself up, and go where you can. So I think it's good to be positive. It's good to be somebody people can turn to. Hopefully that's what we bring to the pod, not just me. I think this applies to everybody at LIBP. I mean, I feel bad for you guys because you're the guys doing the review pods. I don't have to do that post depression central. I just have to go and like drink a glass of Gatorade and drown my sorrows. But other than that, yeah, I sympathize more with you. I think that question should have been directed to you, not to me.
It's the meme where the individual is bracing themselves to be attacked in the back, and you're sleeping soundly, Sam, from not having to indulge in some of the match reviews. But we happily do it because it's an opportunity for the three of us and our friends to chat. And, there's not enough time in life to have a fun conversation with people that you enjoy and are friendly with and love having in your life. And so sometimes it means you talk about a terrible Chelsea match, and sometimes it means that you get to talk about a great win and everything in between. But we turn our attention to a question from Skippy saying, and this is one point that you did talk a little bit about the size and strength adaptation in the Premier League, but they're asking about, is there a small worry? They have a small worry about seeing recent Bundesliga talent having coped with the difference in the Premier League. What's your level of concern around that being a issue for Nkunku as he comes to Chelsea?
I would say in terms of strength, not really. I don't really have an issue. I think he's shown that he's pretty much somebody who's well adapted to physical requirements, the way he uses his body to absorb contact, the way he can get into positions and actually compete in duels. I think sort of gives me optimism that he's well acclimatized. His balance is absolutely fantastic. Even when he gets hit when he's moving, he can stay on his feet. I've had this discussion with a couple of other guys and scouts who tend to disagree on this fact, saying that he does get a little imbalanced when he does get hit. But I've seen, I think, enough instances for me to say, okay, he does know how to use his body well. I think he will go through those hard challenges, and some of them he'll go down, but most of the times he'll probably stay on his feet. In terms of size, I think obviously aerial duels and stuff, we will see some sort of a difference, I'm guessing, in terms of numbers, but just the quality of his movement, the positions in which he's able to get headers, does convince me that he'll be able to use his size well. When I look at him in terms of his build and size, the guy who pops up in my mind is Alexis Sanchez. And Sanchez is, I think, about 6 centimeters shorter than him. So had a very productive time, at Arsenal, somebody who was able to provide goals and assists despite his frame, popped up inside the box, scored a lot of goals in those peak years. So I would say that he's a good reference in terms of size and sort of strength do matter. But when you look at Sanchez, absolute bull of a man, had great physique, but size didn't really come into the comparison at all. We've seen Lisandro Martinez, who was being ridiculed by pundits alike, saying he's not going to survive the Premier League, ended up being Manchester United's best centre back, and winning all kinds of aerial duels at his height. So I think Nkunku can absolutely, use his current physical gifts and still, make a smooth, seamless transition into the Premier League.
Sasha had asked the question about the realistic expectation for goals or assists. We did mention that a realistic expectation that Sam floated out there was 12 for an initial season, but
I
our
would say
11.
12 in the league season. I would say
Yes.
like 7, 4,
Okay.
7, 5 in the league season. Yeah, not over the season. I'm not counting the League Cup or the FA Cup. I'm
Fair.
talking strictly in the league. I'm talking about, 11 or 12 contributions in 38 games, which is decent, but not what you would expect from somebody like an Nkunku. And 20 in 38 is where we're actually getting into the meat of it. So I think those are my predictions.
Excellent. We also have a question from Blue London 1905. Given all the discussion for years about Kai not being a striker, can Nkunku be a nine? We talked a little bit about this on just that he can. He has played for Leipzig in that role. And is he better suited as a creator who can also go forward? I think we just will underline the fact that you said, Sam, you're wasting the maximum potential if you're not playing Nkunku as a 10, but he can do the job in other positions.
Absolutely. I think the only dilemma for me in Poch's mind would be if I can take somebody like a Harry Kane, who I would say isn't the most explosive of center forwards. Like you don't see him, at this age or even the season past, you don't see him absolutely motoring away from defenders. He's quick, but I wouldn't say he's explosive off the mark. He's somebody who's just really good with his feet. He's able to create separation very well. He's also able to drop extremely deep into those central midfield positions and orchestrate play. And I think that's where he might look at Nkunku and say, what if predominantly I sort of vacate the box and try to figure out if there is a way I can get Nkunku more involved, in the heartbeat of orchestrating everything in the attacking phase. My only worry is who is then our attacker into the box? If he's the number 9, who do you have at number 10 who's attacking the box for headers? Mudrik is not going to do it. Madueke is not going to do it. Sterling does stuff, but only when he's at the far post and when he's box crashing from deep, sort of like what Havertz does, but from wide. So we don't have that profile at all. We don't have somebody at a number 10. You do have Kai Havertz, but he's going away. So I think it just makes a lot of sense to put him in the position where we've seen the most out of him. I would say there is also a possibility that you can put him out wide and then try to sort of use him in the Ericsson role where he drops centrally and allows somebody like a Gusto or a Reece James to overlap when he's vacating the channel and trying to pull the opposition fullback inside. But you would arguably want him in the center. You don't want him, like we mentioned before, to be bullied by centre backs, to be under constant scrutiny, to be marked as the main man. You want him to be away from the danger and then arriving when anybody least expects it. So
We had another question from Stutz asking, how successful can Nkunku be at Chelsea without a striker? And maybe that changes the optics. Like if he is having to play in that 9 role, does that change your expectation for 1 year, 2 year in terms of the volume of contributions that he can make in terms of just maybe goals and assists?
I would say one thing that everybody needs to know about Nkunku is he's not explosive over long range. He's not somebody who is a top level sprinter like a Mudrik. He's not somebody who gets quicker with the sprint. He's very good over the first 3 seconds, where he's able to accelerate away from a player. But then after 3 to 10 seconds is when players can catch up to him. So if you're going to put him as a number 9 and play him in a way that Pochettino does, you'd want somebody to be able to run beyond the last line, and it's not him. I wouldn't expect him to come up against a Premier League centre back and outstrip them for pace. Maybe if he's able to make the kind of clever movements behind on the blind side, then he can get some way, to getting onto a 1v1. But it would be a challenge. It would definitely be a challenge to get him to do it consistently. I don't think he has the burst to run in behind. But if you do play him as the number 9, I would say that you'd probably see his created numbers rocket a lot more than his goal scoring numbers. I think that's what I'm predicting happens if he plays as a number 9. He becomes more of a false 9 kind of player, like what we saw Fabregas do for Spain, where he would drop very deep and try to bring others into play. I think that's what would happen with Nkunku. Um, but yeah, he wouldn't be a complete flop, but I would say that you're limiting quite a lot of his strengths in those positions.
And then our last question from ZCFC, just saying, assuming Nkunku starts as a 10 in a 4-2-3-1, which three attackers would play with him in the first game of the season? So this is Chelsea playing Liverpool at home at Stamford Bridge. And this is they gave you some additional information just saying, assume also Jackson has been signed, Armando Broja is fit. So you now have a full complement of the attackers we believe to be here at the start of the season, plus potentially one additional signing. They pushed it on you. You are not accepting it. So it's not likely a jinx, but give us maybe a starting forward attack from that collection of players.
So like I mentioned, the three attacking midfielders in a 4-2-3-1 would arguably be Mudryk, Nkunku, and Raheem Sterling. I think that's the three I'm looking at. At the center forward role is where it gets extremely interesting because I don't think Broja is like the other two. I think Broja is more of a number 9 who's excellent at running behind the last line, somebody who's shown that he's very good in a transitional system at Southampton. You saw him running consistently on the break and then create the kind of havoc that he was doing with his pace. I mean, when you've got somebody who's 6'3.5" and runs like lightning, you create all sorts of problems. And in that way, I think when you do place Broja up against two centre backs, both of them are very reluctant to move. So in a way, you are pinning the last defensive line thanks to Broja's pace and the kind of physical strength that he brings to you. So it wouldn't be the worst option to play Broja as the number 9. I think in terms of being somebody who pins the defensive line, he is somebody who would facilitate a lot of good things for Nkunku. But he's also very limited when it comes to drifting out wide. I don't see enough ideas from him when he's drifting out to the right-hand side. I don't see enough box movement. Last season should have been, a good 6 months for him to be able to play consistently as a number 9, to develop those facets of his game, to have that coached into him, what he's doing against set defenses, something we never saw against Southampton. When he was playing at Southampton. So I would say that Broja is sort of like a half good, half question mark kind of forward entity. It'll be good to see what the equation is like in preseason, but I would say he's not quite there. And that's what next season will be for. Jackson and Datro Fofana are both interesting because both are, I would say, wide forwards first. They both look like wingers first and center forwards next. And what is interesting there is that both of them can start centrally and drift to either wing. So in a way that you're doing what exactly Harry Kane did, you're vacating the central box and you're allowing the number 10 to sort of attack the box and then arrive late, which is what Nkunku loves doing for his headers and, for his cutbacks and shooting from when the centre backs have been distracted and being pulled away. So I would say either of those two options is something that would obviously add a lot more. Datro Fofana, I think, needs a loan. He does look a little shy of top game experience to come from the Norwegian league, Eliteserien, and to directly make a contribution in the Premier League is a huge ask. So I would say just get him a good loan, maybe in Ligue 1 or in the Bundesliga, develop him. And Nicholas Jackson looks like a good option to play there. Somebody who's able to offer hold-up play, somebody who's able to drift out wide, vacate the box, also create from wide. It's something that I've seen him do quite a lot. So I think there's a good underlying equation there. So if Nicholas Jackson comes, we might actually see him become first choice. I think Broja and him would be the two competing number 9s next season.
All right, and the one last part of that question too is, Sam, a dream striker, if you had your choice in world football of someone that you could pair with Nkunku to get the most out of them, who would it be?
I think that's a simple question. I think if I pose that question to you, you'd probably read my mind and give that answer. It's Harry Kane, I would say.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Mbappe, but Harry Kane is great too.
Did you think I was going to say Lukaku? No, sir.
No.
I'm going or Dusan Vlahovic. No. I'm not a man for surprises. I think Harry Kane would actually be a very, very good candidate. Obviously, he is world class. I think that's beyond doubt now. But just the fact that he's somebody who's used to dropping and again vacating the central zone, allowing runners to crash from all directions. Somebody who's very, very well attuned to a Pochettino style of play, somebody who's got an amazing equation with the manager. I think those are all extremely radiant points to consider. So I would say Nkunku and Harry Kane would be absolutely phenomenal partnership to have. Mbappe, sure, if you had the money, if you could pay, 900,000 a week, it would be a good option. But Harry Kane, if Daniel Levy finds it in his heart somewhere in that one lone cardiac cell lingering in his chest to sell us one of his star players, I think, I think it would be a phenomenal partnership.
Well, we know that our listeners have way more than one cell left in the cardiac cavity of their chest, and we want to thank them for the love and support that they share with the show, because you make what we do so enjoyable. And so thank you very much for the wonderful questions that we got for this episode. We'll continue to get more of your questions on the show throughout the summer and into the start of next season. But Sam, that is a wrap on this episode. Thank you so much for all of your diligent work and preparation to make sure that people walk away with a fuller understanding of Chelsea's latest striker, our most recent French forward, in Cristopher Nkunku.
It's been a pleasure as always, Dan. I mean, you could ask me to discuss like varieties of macaroons and I would jump on the pod with you. So I just need an excuse, my friend. So I'm really, really happy. Again, like you mentioned, I'm just echoing the sentiment. It's been a fantastic experience being on the Discord community, just talking to people, watching memes unfold in the middle of all our misery. It's kept me sane at a time. And it's just lovely to see all these people coming up with such incredible questions. Somebody like me, I mean, I love to listen and learn. So it's been fantastic to just be in that space and, be as invigorated as I feel right now. So thank you so much on my behalf and on all of us. So looking forward to doing the next one with you.
Well, I'm sure Chelsea won't keep us waiting too long, and we'll make sure that eventually we do a macaroon power ranking for our wonderful Discord community, because you brought it up, Sam. But that's going to do it for this episode. So thank you so much again for listening to the show. We hope you're staying safe and staying well. But until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.